Hi, it's really nice to be talking to you again today, this time about something a little bit different. You're going to be finding out about lots of different types of diversity, and I want to talk to you about a hidden kind of diversity. And I thought that one of the interesting ways of doing that was to tell you a little bit about my story and then to reflect about how the department feels about things like this. So when I went to school, these were my friends, and you can see that I had a very diverse bunch of friends. You won't see me in this picture because there's absolutely no way you're seeing a photograph of me aged 16. But these were my friends. You can see that there's gender diversity within this picture. You can see that there's quite a lot of ethnic diversity within this picture. I went to a comprehensive school in Manchester, and it was a very, very mixed, diverse background. But there's one kind of diversity that you cannot see in this picture, and that's any LGBT plus diversity. It wouldn't be obvious if any of those people were lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transitioning. Now, I never knew it at the time, but one of those people in the picture is now bisexual. Sadly, it's never the person that I spent most of my school life wishing was bisexual, but it's totally hidden. You wouldn't know which of those 5 people it is. And when I was at school, there was something called Section 28, which absolutely prohibited anyone in an educational setting in schools from talking about sexuality in any type of way. So it was simply an issue that was never discussed. So for me, growing up as a gay kid in this background was really very challenging. There was nobody that I felt I could talk to about those issues. It wasn't an accepted part of life when I was growing up. And even today, even though everything's changed dramatically for LGBT plus people in Britain, still it's a hidden form of diversity. There is no need to tell somebody that you're gay if you don't want to. You might think it's easier not to say and just live your life quietly. Now, when I started as an academic at York, one of the things I was aware of was that York is a very inclusive department. You might not realise it, you're all new here, but it's unusually inclusive for a science department at the top of British science. And for a long time, it's supported women in science and families in science, and it's been very understanding of caring responsibilities. And that's represented in the Athena Swan Gold Award. We want all of our students and staff to thrive, no matter who they are. But if we go back to about 2005, I'd been in the department for a little while by then. This was one of our students, Tim Bradbury, and Tim was gay, and Tim got in touch with the head of department at the time and said the following. He said, "There's gossip in the department about Dave Smith. It's homophobic in nature, and it's making some of us very uncomfortable." I was not an out member of staff at that period in time. I was just living my life quietly, I guess, with my boyfriend. And Tim was bothered that the way students were talking about this was not creating a good atmosphere in the department. And this is one of the problems. Where there's hidden diversity, gossip about that begins to thrive. And gossip is very rarely a power for good. And I reflected on what was happening in the department, and I wanted to change the ethos of the department. I wanted to make it inclusive in all ways, and the one tiny bit of that I could do was think about LGBT plus things. And so around then I took a decision to be more open and out, and to talk about issues that LGBT plus people faced. And so this is my current Twitter profile picture, and I think you'll agree that's a fairly out picture. You'll notice things like rainbow lanyards since 2005. A number of those have come in, worn by either LGBT plus staff or people who are allies of LGBT plus staff. And there's a number of markers that we've used to try and represent the fact that we want to be an inclusive department. Another thing that I decided to do very early on, and you'll have already seen it, is that I've talked about my science within the context of my personal life. And I do that in the very introductory lecture to you. I happened to mention that my husband had cystic fibrosis and had a lung transplant, and that journey that he went on of medical care really genuinely did inform and inspire some of the chemistry that we do, and I've simply talked about that as one of the stories of our research. And when you saw that in the introductory lecture, you probably thought, well, the most interesting fact, hopefully, is not the fact that he was gay, but the fact that he was inspired to do science to try and solve problems in the real world. Me being gay is a small part of that story, but it's one that I like to put in so that people realise it's not an issue. It's just who I am, and I don't mind talking about that. And this is a paper that I published. I think I'm the only person ever in the history of chemical research to get a photograph of their civil partnership on the front of a scientific journal, where we wrote about a whole selection of the research that we've been doing over the years, looking at smart nanomedicines and materials inspired by my husband, Sam. So I've used that as a way of talking about the issues a little bit. And back in 2014, I wrote an article that really opened the floodgates in chemistry world, talking about the atmosphere of science, because it's broadly true that across science, people don't want you to talk about your sexuality. They don't want to acknowledge LGBT plus identities, and things had been more difficult for LGBT plus people. And that's something that we want to change. This attitude of no sexuality, please, we're scientists, we don't care about your personal life, just get on with your job. Because it's normal to talk about your personal life with your friends, with your work colleagues, in the workplace. People who are married talk about what they did with their wife. People who are in a gay marriage should be able to talk, in my case, about what they did with their husband. Okay? And we want the department to have that inclusive feel, and we believe genuinely that it does. We've tried to embed lots of things within the ethos of the department, lots of support for LGBT plus people, and some of that is mentioned on our equality and diversity pages, where we have a specific tab for LGBT plus people. And one of the things you'll find in here is that there's a number of LGBT contacts in the department, and these are staff members who stepped forward and said they are particularly happy to talk about LGBT plus issues. They're not all LGBT plus themselves, but a lot of them have experience of supporting LGBT plus supervisees, and they want you to know that they are people who are very happy to be an ear to listen to, if nothing else. And a number of students have talked to me about things over the years. One of the things we did quite early on, in response to Tim saying he felt there was a homophobic atmosphere in the department, after we'd begun to change things, we asked our students, and we did some focus groups with some of the LGBT plus students that we had. And that wasn't done by us as staff. We got one of the gay students to get together some focus groups of people that he knew, and it was all done anonymously within groups by him. And it was done about 5 or 6 years ago now. And we got all sorts of useful information. And one of the things that came out of it was setting up the LGBT contacts that I showed you on the previous page. So students felt there were specific staff members that were happy to talk to them about issues. But they said things, the students, like this: it's important for LGBT students to see there are people like us who make it higher up and do things in their field of study. We see that we can have a future like that. And that refers, for example, to many of our demonstrators in labs who will be openly LGBT plus as they work with you in teaching labs. And students said that the atmosphere in the department made them feel a lot better, particularly having come from a school in one case where LGBTQ welfare was swept under the carpet and there were next to no out students or teachers. And we want the department to be a place that can help your coming out process. So one of the things I want to say specifically, if you're LGBT plus, we will always support LGBT plus students. If you want to come out while you're here, that's absolutely fantastic. If you are already out, that's great as well. But we also acknowledge that coming out can still be a difficult process. You know, we have had students come to the department before, find a very inclusive environment, come out at university, and then have difficulties when they get back home and say, it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. My family aren't understanding. My friends at home aren't understanding. We will support you as best we can in the departmental setting. We're not going to say that life is always easy for LGBT plus people. But what we are going to say is that the department will be as inclusive and as supportive as it possibly can. A lot of things that we've done in the department have been inspired by students of ours. So I showed you Tim from 2005, who perhaps started us thinking about our homophobia within the department and the lack of people being out, and I felt we addressed that. Alex was a student of ours until recently, and Alex talked about trans issues in the department, and Alex was a real pioneer for trans rights within the department. Alex sat on our inclusion and diversity committee, and a whole set of things came out of work that Alex did. So you'll have noticed around the department a whole range of all genders welcome toilets, and that was an initiative started by Alex so that our trans and non-binary students knew that they would be welcome to use whichever facility they chose where they saw that sign. You'll have noticed as new students that your supervisor will have asked you which pronouns the department should use when they refer to you as you go through your degree. This was another initiative started by Alex. We wanted every student starting in this department to know that the department took it seriously, that we want to treat students with respect, and we want to refer to them with the pronouns that they want. It's a simple personal respect thing for who they are. And by asking all of you, hopefully that makes it clear to all of you that this department is a safe space for trans and non-binary students. Alex also briefed all of the academics in the department about what being trans was and how to interact with trans and non-binary students. He really did amazing work. There's been quite a lot of research about workplaces and academic departments and how welcoming or not they are for LGBT plus people. And this is a report that I was particularly involved in commissioning and carrying out, working with the Royal Society of Chemistry. And this report got some really what we would call killer data, which we hope will allow us to transform other workplaces and departments in the way that we feel we've been transforming as a department over the last 15 years. And it contains all sort of extensive data and lived experiences of people that work in physical sciences. And you can go and find that report online if you're interested in reading it. But one of the things that came out of that report was a toolkit of things, and they're going to be launched in November this year. And I wanted to just highlight a couple of them to you. One of the documents is about empowering you as an LGBT plus scientist. So if you're sitting watching this and you're LGBT plus and you want to know what you can do and what support there is, it's in this document that'll go live, and it talks about knowing your rights and understanding what they are. It talks about self-care and how to look after yourself and how to make the best of yourself. And it also talks about solidarity, how to support one another as an LGBT plus community and how other people can support you. And if you're not LGBT plus, but you're wondering how can you support the community, this other document is the one for you about practicing active allyship. And it talks about being an advocate for LGBT plus people, not always waiting for them to have to fight for their rights, speaking up if you see something that's wrong. Self-reflecting, thinking about your own attitudes and the way that you interact with people. And something called bystander intervention, what you do if you hear something that is wrong. We had a really nice example of bystander intervention maybe 5 or 6 years ago when we were just starting out on trans rights. We had a trans student in the department, and there was a small group of students who would say nasty things about that student out of earshot of the student. And interestingly, the students that sat in front of those people in the lecture room acted as bystanders and said it's not acceptable, and came to the department to tell the department that there was unacceptable, transphobic things being said, and we were able to act on that in that circumstance. So it's about being active and being involved where you feel that that's right. I think that science is at a turning point. I think that here in the department things have changed. I hope we're really inclusive. I know we're really supportive. I've written a lot and done lots of interviews about LGBT plus issues across chemistry in particular, but science more widely, and I do think things are changing. Things are getting better, and as you guys move on into PhDs and on into your own scientific careers in industry, in academia, in the public sector, I think you're going to find a much, much better environment for LGBT plus people. And it's really important because doing the best for people does the best for science. And this is something that I wrote in one of those articles. It's only when everybody feels comfortable to be themselves in the workplace without any fear of discrimination that global science will really be able to thrive. And we'll stop wasting all that human capital, and individuals will be able to thrive in the workplace. And that's really important. We want you to thrive here in York, irrespective of who you are. We will support you. Thanks very much.